Good afternoon, church. How exactly does one participate in God's mission? Certainly, we think about serving in a church ministry or perhaps even beefing up our own personal Bible study or our spiritual disciplines. We may even think about going into our community and trying to serve there. But we probably also think about just the simple telling others about God. And I don't know about you, but telling others about God in our current day seems a bit daunting. How am I supposed to make a difference in someone else's life? Surely I'm not qualified for that. Well, one of my favorite authors named Greg Koukl talks about how God seems to like to use people. Not everyone can go up to someone and start a Bible study and then baptize them a few months later. In fact, most of us can't. And as Greg would say, most of us are gardeners and not harvesters. We may feel an expectation to harvest and think that we can't do it, and so just convince ourselves that we should just avoid it altogether. But as gardeners, we plant seeds and allow God to give growth. So how does that look like? What does that look like? Let's go ahead and take our Bibles and open up to 2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. Now, you're probably already familiar with this story. A man named Naaman has a skin problem called leprosy. What exactly that is, we don't know. But in seeking of a way to get rid of this disease, he hears about a man named Elisha. Now, when he meets Elisha, he's told to dip into the Jordan River 7 times. And at first he doesn't want to do it, but he ends up doing it. And because he did it, he is clean. So that's the basic story, but let's go and dig in just a bit deeper and see what else is going on and what God might have to say for our lives. So let's go ahead and read this together. We're going to start in verse 1 and we're going to go through all the way to 15. Now Naaman was a commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of leprosy." Well, Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go." The king of Aram replied, "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter, I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a fight with me?" When Elisha, the man of God, heard the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message: "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots, and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." But Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than any rivers in Israel? Couldn't I have washed in them and be cleansed?" And so he went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much then, when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself into the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all of his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all of the world except in Israel." Now, this story is a story about Naaman, who has a clear need, a clear issue, a problem going on with him. And he is led to God. At the end of the story, he is led to God. It's a story about the journey of a person being led towards God through this restoration. But what leads up to this? What makes this story possible? Well, certainly God has a part in it. He's the one who restored Naaman in the first place. And certainly Elisha had a part in it. He's the one who connects Naaman to God's power. Even the master had a role when he wrote a letter and allowed Naaman to leave and seek out the prophet. But perhaps one of the most important links in this chain was the little girl who brought up the promise of hope in the first place. Was this little girl qualified? Not in the slightest. First of all, she's a child. And of all the people to have credibility and weight when it comes to advice, it's not a child. Second of all, she's a girl. And though the ancient world usually doesn't treat women as bad as we're led to believe, she doesn't have the clout that a male would have. She's also a foreigner. She's a captive of a raid, and she's now a servant. She doesn't sound like the person who would be qualified to lead someone towards God. And yet, God uses the servant girl in his mission. It wasn't the king of Israel who pointed Naaman to Elisha. Not only is he the most respected and authoritative of the nation, but he should be one of the most qualified and knowledgeable about God to do so. You would expect the king to be the one that God uses because he's qualified. In fact, actually, the king sort of freaks out about what exactly is happening and what he thinks is expected of him. But no, it was the servant girl who was in the right place at the right time. She simply recognized an opportunity to tell about what God had done in her life. She's had first-person experience with what God could do. She says, if only Naaman would go to the city of Samaria, to the place of Samaria, there's a prophet there who could absolutely heal him. She knows what she's talking about. She saw a chance to raise awareness of a solution to a problem that only God could solve, and she took it. That's it. She didn't cure Naaman. She didn't talk to him on behalf of God. She didn't give him the gifts to take to the prophet. She didn't give him leave to do so. She simply spoke about what God had done and what God had done in her own family. So there's a person in your life. There's someone that needs seeds sown, and you are the person to do that. They may not need someone to seal the deal or to pull off a massive, comprehensive Bible study. What they may just need is a story of hope. What they may just need is for you to share what God means to you.